While the situation in Mariupol remains tense, the UN Security Council held a meeting on Tuesday to discuss the conflict in Ukraine. Russia's ambassador to the UN commented on how he sees the West approaching the situation.
The West's concern for Ukraine and Ukrainians is opportunistic and selfish. Ukrainians are needed today only as cannon fodder in a proxy war with Russia until the last Ukrainian. At the same time, the West does not forget about its own benefit. So weapons manufacturers in Western countries are joyfully rubbing their hands, counting their own profits from the increase in defense orders.
15-member body that leads the United Nations convened a meeting, the topic of which was refugees created by the conflict in Ukraine. Now, the United States and its allies unloaded a lot of allegations and accusations against Russia. But Dmitry Polyansky, he took to the floor and defended Russia and called out and debunked a lot of the accusations that were being made. He went on to say that Russia has actually taken in refugees starting since 2014, when the United States and its allies toppled the Ukrainian government. And in total, 2.5 million people have fled to the Russian Federation as a result of U.S. actions in Ukraine. Now, he went on to talk about political repression in Ukraine and how attempts to portray Ukraine as being some kind of democracy being threatened is just simply not accurate. Political opposition forces are being rounded up and repressed and have been repressed. And for the past 8 years, they've been waging a war against their own population in the eastern regions. In Donbass, he called out the U.S. military-industrial complex. He talked about how a lot of the military hardware the United States has given to Ukraine doesn't even work. Some of these vehicles have not been functional, and they've just kind of been dumping them on Ukraine, and how the United States claims that it cares about Ukrainian lives, but at the same time, it seems to be trying to prolong the conflict and throw the Ukrainians' lives away in an effort to hurt Russia. Based on that, he argued that the calls for a ceasefire coming from the United States and their allies seem insincere, and there's a legit concern that this is simply an opportunity to let the extremist Nazi forces regroup and continue their efforts not just against Russia, but against Ukrainian civilians. Now, later, after we heard from the countries making up the UN Security Council, we did hear the Ukrainian representative get up, and he made a lot of accusations against Russia, one being that Russia is not allowing civilians to leave, a factory, and basically is enabling and causing civilians to be killed. This is what the Ukrainian representative said when addressing the Security Council.
The situation in Mariupol remains the most critical. Thousands of civilians are still in the city. Hundreds of them, including children, have taken shelter in the Azovstal plant. They need immediate safe evacuation, and the Russian forces are well aware of this. Instead, the Russians deny all requests from the Ukrainian side, world leaders, and the UN high officials for evacuation corridors for civilians.
Dmitry Polyansky, representing the Russian Federation, spoke and explained very clearly that the presence of these civilians in the factory was hidden, despite repeated requests on the part of Russia to make sure that no civilians were in harm's way. And now Russia has been calling on Kiev to influence the fighting forces there and allow the civilians to leave the factory. So essentially, Ukrainians are being used as human shields by these extremist anti-Russian forces that have been armed and trained by the United States and Ukraine. Now, it's also important to note that at the Security Council meeting, China took to the floor and talked about the dangers facing the global economy and how the targeting and manipulation of currencies as a result of U.S. sanctions is having a very long-term and serious effect, not just in Russia, but in other places. Now, the world economy is being badly affected by these moves by the United States and the escalation of the conflict. So it was quite a meeting at the UN Security Council, a lot of allegations unloaded against Russia. Russia did have an opportunity as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, a body that was formed among the countries that defeated fascism in the Second World War. They had an opportunity to give their side of the story, and they presented facts that are being ignored in Western media and ignored in the tirades of Western leaders. So it was quite a meeting at the Security Council. Not a lot of unity among the countries there. Clearly some very different understanding of events on the ground in Ukraine, as a lot of people are becoming refugees and a lot of people are clearly suffering.